Welcome, everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Paul Tazewell, the costume designer for Wicked. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
I'm very excited to be speaking to you about this film, um, where you're not just reinterpreting the original costumes from the musical designed by Susan Hilferty for Broadway, but also from The Wizard of Oz. And both of those projects have achieved these are iconography to so many people. They're
Yeah.
so attached to these looks. So, how long did you let yourself freak out before getting down to work on these costumes?
I guess the freak out lasted, look, the freak out maybe lasted a week because I needed to go to Susan and say, Susan, I've been asked to do this. It's like just what, have your blessing that I was going to be re-envisioning, this world that she was the springboard for. What everyone did for that original Broadway musical. I think that it was the draw for so many invested fans, and then to be asked or to be invited to reimagine what that world might be was it's a huge honor. And I took that week, and then I went about the work, and I spent about a year designing, and that was before our official pre-production period, which is when I then moved to London for the next just under 2 years. And went about researching, collecting all kinds of images of all sorts, but working with very closely with John Chu, the director, in developing a world that would be our brand new vision of Wicked, but inclusive of the culture of The Wizard of Oz, which includes the Wicked Broadway show as well. And figuring out ways that are very engaging for that fan base, and also for new audience members as well.
So it sounds like you were working on these costumes for just about 3 years, and which makes sense. You have the main characters that everyone knows, and then you have the Munchkins in Munchenland, the Shiz University students, the citizens of Emerald City.
That's right.
How many costumes did you design and then have fabricated for this?
Well, I mean, I can say there for our two leading women, for Glinda and for Elphaba, we had about 25 looks a piece that were designed over the whole and made for over the whole two films, the stories, and these are the different variations of of costumes, as well.
Yeah.
But then we ended up for Glinda, we ended up building actually 60, if you count all the multiples that were necessary for stunt doubles and just camera doubles. And then for Cynthia, there were probably 75 costumes that were made because of all of her flying and any stunts and doubles that we needed to cover as well. So there, I mean, that gives you a glimpse of the number of costumes. I mean, there are stats on just how many background we had, which was we had days of 400 plus. For Emerald City, we had days that were huge background days. But it was all delightful in creating this world that needed to feel, even within the world, this fantasy world that we were creating, it needed to be fully realized. and on sets that were fully realized as well. I mean, these are not CGI spaces. They were full on old Hollywood spaces that Nathan Crowley created and designed and created. So it was magical to enter into that world because it felt so real.
I can imagine, and the costumes are a huge part of that too, in bringing this to life. And you mentioned this, the number of the stunt doubles, etc., that you had. There's so much action that happens in this movie: dancing, sliding, flying, horseback riding.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how closely did you work with other teams, choreographers, set designers, and etc., to make sure that the costumes would stand up to everything they would be put through?
It was imperative. I mean, it was
Hmm.
imperative to, and I'm used to that. Working in the world
Yeah,
of musical theater. I'm always working very closely with the choreographer. The element of stage combat and flying as well was added to the mix. It wasn't the first time that I had worked with a flight choreographer, but we had to joyfully. I mean, I did, work with them to understand what was our department required to provide, for with the harnessing, with when you add a harness to somebody, then you're adding inches to their body, and
yeah,
so you have to accommodate for that with the costume, and you also need to not be able to see it, and you can't cover it in the same way that you might theatrically, because you're going to be up close and personal, and that all that needs to look as pristine as possible. So it was imperative that we knew when we were going to need to have certain kinds of harnessing for Cynthia specifically. Cynthia did almost all of her own stunts, and flying. And so it was that world of communication was, it was imperative that we knew exactly what was going to happen. It's also, for me, it was imperative to still be able to make choices that would create the most beautiful costume as well. So choosing fabrics that would float or that would move in a very beautiful way and that would speak to the character, that was always going to be my priority. And holding to that as as being in charge of what we would visually see and what we were going to set up. So there was always, there's a compromise there as well, just making sure that I could get what I wanted visually, and and then the function would actually happen properly.
yeah. I mean, you talked about the different styles of fabrics that you used, and I was particularly curious about not even just the type of fabrics, but how you found the right shade of black
Mm.
for Elphaba's looks, especially since like in different fabrics, they even the same black can come across very differently, especially on film.
I mean, it's we made the decision that the black, the reason that the choice of having Elphaba's monochromatic black color story, that it was fueled by the fact that she was still in mourning for her mother who passed away when she was a very little girl, because of her mother was forced to choose milk flour, by Governor Throp, so that she didn't have another green daughter or green child. So that caused Nessa Rose to be crippled, and also it killed her. And so there emotionally there's a she's stunted, Elphaba, and also that it creates armor for her as she moves through the early years of her life. It is uh, it pulls her outside of the rest of the world, the rest of Munchkinland, and it becomes a defining color for her. All of this is influenced, as a designer, it's influenced by The Wicked Witch of the West and what was set up with that story, and me trying to make sense of why did The Wicked Witch of the West end up being in black, and how can we create an emotional tie to what that choice is for Elphaba. And that made the most sense for us, as we were thinking about it. And it keeps her, it keeps her as an extreme kind of individual character, and it makes it very specific, which I think is really beautiful. But along with that, when making the choice to have her color palette be centered on black, it was imperative that Alice Brooks, the DP, the cinematographer, that she was able to light it, and she lit the blacks beautifully. I did the work that I could to create a play of textures where you could find definition within the costume. Some of that was because I was infusing there's lots of hand felting that's used in Elphaba's earlier costumes. And so we were working purple into lots of that black so that it just has more depth. There's more play of color in it. And then Alice figured out a way to light, each of those looks, and all of Elphaba's looks, in a way where you actually can see the variation of color, and you can see the green skin come through the sheer fabric of Elphaba's dresses, which was imperative as well. I mean, that she, Elphaba as a character is very, she's very comfortable in her own skin and has figured out a way to relate to other people, knowing that they're going to judge her for the color of her skin. And it was very important within the story to show that she wears her skin proudly. It's not, that's very clear. It's just how she then has to navigate other people's issues, and so in doing that, what I was hoping to telegraph with her clothing was that we are always aware of the green of her skin.
I really like that, and I noticed that a lot of her costume specifically had sort of see-through elements to it, which was really nice to always have that somewhere on her body that's not necessarily her face and hands. It was
Exactly.
great. Yeah. And by contrast to that, you have someone like Madame Morrible, who is often in these like layers of competing patterns
Mhm.
and things. It almost, and with the high collar, so she almost looks like a snake that's shedding her skin sometimes.
That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, the wonderful thing about and working with Michelle Yeoh is, like, as with the whole cast. I mean, she's an amazing woman. She's a woman of style, and wears clothes beautifully. The because Morrible as a character is in control of the weather. I thought that it was important to. I mean, like, you see it in the shape of her hair and the color of her hair as well as, it's like a cloud. It's like,
Yeah.
there's atmosphere that surrounds her. And the design imagery that we put into her clothing, was referencing, astronomy and, and those things that are in the night sky, and then, other kinds of magical symbols. I mean, like with her academic robe, she's got this stole that is all, they're magical symbols that we made up, for this world of Oz. but something that just feels otherworldly, and how we put together the kind of swirling brocades that are
Yeah.
underneath that beautiful Pane velvet. It's just to give her this presence, this kind of a very inviting presence that then will, we see her, tilt towards the wizard, and and becoming more of a kind of a villain herself. So it's just it's a wonderful character to have evolve and create what is her magic about.
Absolutely. I mean, and there are so many great characters in this movie. The personalities of everyone, it really, especially on the screen, it just jumps off the
Yeah.
screen. I Which character was the most fun to design for you?
Oh gosh. All of them,
Yeah.
for different reasons. I mean, I think that
Mm,
it's, as a designer, especially on this, but I normally, I'm always uh, kind of looking to walk in their shoes to be able to then make decisions that are specific to a character. With this, I fell in love with each of the characters, and that then helped me to make very clear visual ideas of who they would be. It's as well, it was so very easy to fall in love with these actors, and really embrace everything that they were bringing to the characters. So, it was, while it was very challenging, it was very, it was always a creative and easy process to, kind of be a part of the magic of creating it. It's the I think that was just the joy of the overall experience.
Imagine. There's one. So, this is a fantasy world, right? And all the costumes are very kind of fantastical, but you also have within this world a theatrical show that we see in the Emerald City. So I'm curious how, when all of the costumes are so fantastical, how do you, as a costume designer, separate, what is everyday wear for these people versus what is a costume
Right.
for a show in this world?
I mean, that was one of the big questions and challenges of that number of Wizamania, Nathan Crowley, the production designer, he was he had the original idea of what the scenery would be, and I was then hoping to uh, create costumes that would be reflective of, or at least live comfortably within what that sensibility would be. His idea was that it was like a pop-up book, which is, it was reflective of what we see at the beginning, which is the pop-up book of
Yeah.
City and meeting the wizard. So, to carry that same vocabulary into Wizamania made thematic sense. And then for me, it was, so how can I create magical, theatrical characters that come out of that sensibility? And so it's these kind of multi-layered, dressed characters, but also because of the pleating and because of the texture, it's still within the same vocabulary because of everything that we've seen on Elphaba and what we've seen on Glinda as well. I mean, there are elements, fabric texture elements that play throughout. It just happens that this is then the boldest of that representation.
Yeah. They're so much fun to watch, to look at, especially in the context of that number. I absolutely love them. Another one of my favorite details of the costumes here is that Galinda she doesn't wear a shiz uniform like everyone else, but all the clothes that she wears at school do contain a version of the stripes
Yes.
that are on the shiz uniform. So I'm wondering where that idea came from for
Well,
you.
she's Galinda, so
Yeah. Yes, she has to wear pink.
so she found out she got the memo that everybody's going to be in a uniform and everybody's going to have a certain stripe. So her stripe pattern is the same, basically the same scale as everyone
Mm,
else's, but she has her her signature color palette. And it is gray, but it's going to be a pearl gray, and of course it's going to have pink involved with it. So it's just the way that she is, but that, I think that was perfect for her as a character choice. I mean, it draws attention to her in a way that is charming, and also somewhat playing by the rules. It's just making sense of who she is, and then uh, elevating that. And I think that was what that was the fun part of designing Glinda. What was that? And then also, it's yeah. Again, I go back to these amazing actors. For Ariana Grande, it's just it's delight to be able to dress her and have fun in that way, because I knew that she would play it up. I mean, it's like she's fully buying into this idea, and she makes the most of it as well. And so we're meeting each other at the same place, for each of those looks.
mhm. And I'd forgotten to ask this earlier when we were talking about the collaboration with other teams,
Mhm.
but you also have in this movie you have CGI animal characters like Dr. Dillamond. Did you also design the
Yeah,
clothes that they would be wearing? Yeah.
yeah.
How did that work with that
I
collaboration?
mean, it was amazing. I mean, it was with the team of CGI artists, and they were coming up with the characters, and I was coming up with ideas for the clothing and choosing fabrics for that clothing, and because all that needed to then get rendered into the actual animal. But what was most important for John was that these were animals that walk through their lives in Oz on four legs, if they are four-legged animals. With Dulcibert, she does stand up on two legs, but for the most part, they move as real animals. They relate to people from the point of view of real animals. They just happen to wear clothing.
Mm,
So that clothing needed to live on them and go on them in ways that it would make sense that they would be able to get into a piece of clothing.
that makes sense. And we're coming up on the end of our time together.
Yeah.
So before we go, I have to ask, which single look in the whole film was your favorite?
Oh my gosh. Um, you're not the first to ask.
I'm sure I'm not.
And it is really difficult, almost impossible for me to say. I love all of the costumes. I mean, there was so much of me that went into each of the costumes. I think that the Elphaba Emerald City dress is one that
Mhm,
if I played Elphaba, I would really love wearing it.
mhm.
So that's connected to my sensibility. Very directly connected to my sensibility. I love that. I say that, and then I think about the bubble dress. And like, well,
Mm,
so
mm.
that I go through, everything that I was able to design, and I'm just, I hope that audiences want to wear all the clothes for whatever reason. I mean, I hope that they are embraced and that they feel appropriate for whenever they appear.
Um,
And it was just a joy to be able to design, all the different elements. I mean, as I think about them, I remember what that process was, that process of creating, and who made them, and what they brought to that process as well. And it was just a constant feast, of creativity.
I can imagine. I mean, there's so much fun stuff in this film to look at. It's really an eye-popping visual spectacle. I will tell you that my favorite, and it was a background characters, but in the when we get to the Emerald City, there are these group of characters that I call them the Tweedledee and Tweedledum looks,
Oh,
where they have their like their arms are inside their pants, and it just seemed so perfectly impractical in a very Emerald City way.
right. They're the flatheads.
The flatheads, okay.
Yes. So they appear. They're actually in the original the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. But
Hmm.
they're inspired by that. But they come and they dance in the fountain, and then they go
Yes,
on their
yeah.
head in the fountain as well. Yes, those are some of my favorites. But yeah, but it's just it's impossible to choose really.
Yeah.
But that was fun to design.
I can imagine. That's all the time we have. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a delight to talk to you, and thank you for your work on this film.
Of course, it was so much my pleasure.
Thank you.